Good afternoon, I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day. My name's Tom, I am a professional composer and music producer living and working in Wales, and I'm not very good at the cello, but for some reason I keep writing music that involves an awful lot of cello. So today I thought I would go through perhaps my most cello heavy track and show you a little bit about how I recorded and produced Loam. Since this track is fundamentally very, very simple in terms of its structure, there's very little to it except the cello, I thought I'd use this as an opportunity to try and give you some advice on how to record instruments you're not very good at playing in a way that makes it seem like you're a bit better at playing them than you actually are. And this will apply to any instrument really, you know, whether it's the Irish low D whistle or the piano. Well, piano would be tricky actually. Any single note at a time instrument you can apply this sort of stuff to. So yeah, let's take a look at how I turned a substandard ability into what I at least hope is a slightly better than substandard piece of music. Oh, and if you want a TLDR, because I do waffle quite a lot. So this is the project file for Loam. As you can see, it's an absolute disgrace, incredibly messy. So I started things off by creating a very, very simple pad. And I do this with a lot of tracks, but I like there to be some sort of atmosphere before the main kind of body of the track comes in, basically. And the pad in this instance was created using 4 different elements. The main thing you hear is this, which is a bounce I made of a PianoBook sample library. I can't remember what it's called. Family Pad 3. PianoBook has some amazing resources for free libraries that people make themselves. I'm sorry, I'll link this in the description in terms of providing proper credit. But yeah, so this is just a super, super simple pad. If I just play it without any of this on, it just sounds like this. So lovely, very kind of simple sounding pad. I put that through Valhalla Shimmer, and this is at 100% wet. The resulting audio file prior to my processing just sounds like this. Which is basically what it sounds like in the actual track. I can't remember what I did. It's probably just surgical EQs. Yeah, so I did a whole bunch of different little EQ things, just whenever something was sticking out that was annoying me. Pro Q3, great EQ. Just thins it all down, make sure that it's not getting in the way of any of the other frequencies, because when dealing with like real instruments and cello, I want to make sure that the richness of that instrument can come through as much as possible. So that's the intro pad, and I never wanted pads and atmospheres to be the main body of this track, but I knew that just having a pad that does the same thing for a whole track is a bit dull, and I always like to try and do something to give it a bit of a personal influence. And to do that, I actually incorporated one of my second most densely cello-based tracks, which is called In the Pale Grey Dawn. So I have these 2 audio files here, and they are just the master bounce of In the Pale Grey Dawn. So if I take all of this stuff off, so it's a track I've previously released. It's not even in the same key as this one. But then I put it through a bunch of effects, initially doing that. It's very, very, very aggressive EQ. Just to isolate that little frequency band, so between 380 and 577. So if we listen to that, a little bit gross, and then I put that through multipass to stutter it all up. And so that will be flowing with a completely different track. The peaks and troughs of In the Pale Grey Dawn don't line up at all to this track, but I wanted it to feel human and natural, and having two of these basically just results in these sort of occasional stuttery ambient effects coming through. And then on top of both of those, I've got these two tracks here, which, as far as I'm aware, are basically just noise. There was like a bit of noise from the previous cello recording that I cut up to, again, make it seem a bit more organic and warm. And there's something about hearing noise in a track that works quite well, I think. So there's the noise combined with the main pad on top. You can sort of see how if I didn't have those other elements, it would just feel like a really generic, boring pad behind a track, you know? It just provides that feel of authenticity to a piece of music that you wouldn't get if you just had a plain old pad singing away the whole time. So that's the very start. Then you get these swells that come in. Now Loam, as a track, is the last one in my Element series. It was supposed to represent Earth. So I wanted something that felt dense, grounded, and almost stubborn in its atmospheres. And these swells were sort of supposed to be like the slow, deep movements of tectonic plates. And when the cello comes in later on, it's almost like a freshly germinated seed blooming out of the soil. That was sort of what I was going for. This is so pretentious, I'm really sorry. But yeah, this was the idea behind it. So the swells are all here. So originally the swells sounded just like this. And then I added my own recordings over the top, kind of just with those same notes. And that's tip number one, I suppose, for trying to make yourself seem like a better player than you actually are, is just drench everything in reverb and then no one can tell. But yeah, these swells were very, very simple. Like, I haven't even done anything to the individual audio files, so if I just play one of them. So incredibly simple, and the processing on all of it is just that, and then I've sent it to Black Hole. Like, that's it. Just take all the top end off, you know, make sure you've not got any nasty sub-frequencies coming down there, and then drench it in reverb. So it doesn't sound kind of conventionally nice by like mixing or production standards. And that was very much the point, because I wanted it to feel muted, feel like you're underground, you know. There's an awful lot of low mids going on in there. It's sounding a bit muddy. And I wanted that to be how it started and finished, but I also knew that if it starts like that, when the cellos first come in, it'll just have much more of an impact. It'll feel like, just subconsciously, because you haven't heard any like proper high-end frequencies or shimmering of instruments for the first like 45 seconds or whatever. When that happens, it'll feel nicer. Then it's on to the actual cello. What I would do to initially sketch out these ideas is I just have the atmosphere playing, and I'd pull up a sample library and just sort of go for it. Play something, see if I find anything nice. So just to kind of give you an example of that process. Capture, record that, go again. Capture, record that, duplicate the track, do it again. Doesn't really work, that. So, in fact, let's just do this as realistically as possible. So I'd do that and I'd be like, no, that was shit again. Nah, nothing great yet. So that's a very, very rough idea of what I'd do. And just imagine that for the entire length of the track, and then go through replacing each one of those lines with an actual recording. Let's take a look at how I set up the microphones to record. I knew that I wanted a nice wide sound, so I set up my Coles 4038 microphones in stereo. I don't tend to get too technical with specific placements or measurements when I'm setting up microphones. I usually just have a play around and see what sounds nice. I think this is similar to the configuration that I had them in my old place. But yeah, it was a stereo pair of Coles running through my Neve 1073 preamp and then recorded just directly into my interface from there. Here's a quick example of the difference between a mono recording and a stereo recording on my cello. Now, just for clarification, there are so many reasons why you would choose to use a single microphone and not a stereo pair. It's entirely dependent on what you want to achieve, the sound you're going for, and what you have available. But this is actually part of the process of me thinking, well, I'm not actually a concert cellist. I played it when I was in school and then had 0 lessons after that, and that was 10 years ago. But the thing is a single microphone, whatever it is going to be brilliant at capturing an amazing performance. So if you're recording a really, really good player, it matters so much less what microphone you use. You could use an SM57. It would still sound amazing if you've got, Tina Guo playing. However, I am not Tina Guo. And what I was after was the effect of cellos kind of enveloping you as the listener. I wanted it to feel like there were cellos all around you having a little party, as opposed to it being like, here's a cello here, here's another one here, here's another one here, and they're all playing really, really nicely, and you should be listening to each note that each one is playing really specifically. I wanted it to be like a wall of sound, but in a very nice, comfortable, pretty way. And so using a stereo pair with that really helped, because like I said, one microphone can be amazing at picking up a brilliant performance. 2 microphones add space and atmosphere, which can be better when disguising the imperfections of a less than brilliant performance. So that's how I set up the recording. Then we get into the difficult part, guessing the notes. So what I would do from there is listen to the sample cello, and record that. But I would record it multiple times. If I grab some of the audio from one of these, let's see if I can find that same take. So if I drag this out to here and just pull this out, it'll show you everything that I recorded in that take. That's what most of the recordings were like. The only part of that I actually used in the finished track is this. Because the next part of that goes like this. Doesn't even have the top note in it. Because I wasn't comfortable enough trying to record a really good take of me going up in that way. So this right here is the top note in that phrase. And what does the back end of that sound? Yeah, literally. And this will be the case across so many of these recordings. That's why it's so chaotic, is that I would often just feel comfortable enough to get a good note with a nice vibrato, but only that single note. I thought it was better to do that and splice them together than to have an out of tune bit of playing every 10 seconds. And this is the kind of thing that you've got to do, you know, splice all of these things together and you get... Unless you're listening very carefully, that just sounds like I've played it well. Didn't. And that's basically the process that I went through for every line of cello. So it took ages. And, you know, one could make the argument, would it have been quicker to just, like, have a few cello lessons and get better at playing the cello? Possibly. And then going through each one, meticulously adding in your crossfades, finding moments where things didn't quite transition nicely. So like, hey, I've done a load of stuff here. What's this doing? I wanted to make sure that this glissando was the right one. But this will have its own glissando. And I didn't like that one. There wasn't an obvious glissando in that. As opposed to... But you can hear there that in the take that I liked the glissando, I was then out of tune because I'm shit at the cello. But do enough splicing and cutting of things together and it'll sound nice. And it started to get way more difficult later on because the whole thing is in free time. I didn't want there to be a click. I didn't want to feel, you know, married to a tempo with this track. I wanted it to feel natural. This probably made things harder in terms of the recording, but cutting everything together so it flowed in the way that I wanted it to, because I've kept some of the sample cello in. And with that sample cello, I did the same thing. I would take each actual MIDI part and I'd bounce it to audio so I could really align every glissando, every legato moment, every phrase change, removing bits of like bowing that I didn't like very much from the sample and aligning it all together. But the sample cello that I kept in, a lot of it is being sent to black hole again. So there's a lot of reverb on it and I kind of wanted that to emphasize a bit more of the space because my cello is all pretty dry. Another reason why I actually kept in more of the sampled cello than I think I'd originally been planning on getting rid of it completely, but because I was recording on the Coles, they're a very like dark microphone and I wanted a bit of that sparkle to come through. Once you've got all of your cello in place and you've spliced everything together and you've added your crossfades and you've lined up your samples with it nicely, then you gotta make it sound naturally flowy with volume automation, which, as you can see from this, was not the most fun thing to do, because some of it would be fine. I'd want to retain the natural dynamic range that I was trying to play, but you still need to ride the fader. But yeah, I would just go through each line, and if something stuck out, I would try and tame it down, or if I wanted to bring something up, I'd bring something up. But yeah, the end result, I think, sounds quite nice. And then at the end, I just throw all of my cello to the black hole. So it's slowly coming up a little bit during this section. And then at the end, that last swell, and that was to kind of tie it back into the swells from the beginning of the track. And that's pretty much it. But I really don't do myself any favors by constantly writing music for the cello. It would be easier, I think, if I didn't play the cello at all, because then I could just be like, okay, I'm gonna hire a cellist to record this, someone who can actually play it well. I always just end up doing it myself. And I'm glad that I do it because, you know, at the end of the day, this is all part of the process of being a music producer, is experimenting, trying new things, refining your craft. But yeah, that's how you can pretend to be better at any instrument than you actually are. Record multiple takes, splice it all together, and just pay attention to detail with things like the humanity of what you are playing. Dynamic range, I think, makes such a bigger difference than pitch even does. If you heard someone playing a beautiful piece of Chopin on a piano that was a bit out of tune, a bit honky-tonky, that would sound nicer than hearing someone play that same Chopin on a sample library where the velocity is always at 127. And so just, if it takes playing it one note at a time and then trying to splice those things together, then do it, because, you know, real instruments are a joy to work on. I'm shit at the violin, right? But I still bought this for £8 in a charity shop down the road from me, because even if it's like a pizzicato dramedy album that I'm doing for a library company, the value that being able to do this will make to that sort of album, even if all you're doing is putting one layer on top of a full orchestra of sample libraries, that will make a difference. And so yeah, this is exactly why I always try and record at least one real instrument in everything that I'm doing. So yeah, that's how I produced Loam. And yeah, I hope that there's been at least something interesting in this video that you've been able to take away from it. I'm aware I haven't made a video for quite a while. Should be changing soon. I'm in a new space, moved house, moved studio, which was so much more stressful than I thought it would be, but also quite rewarding now that I'm here. And my studio isn't opposite where I sleep, which isn't opposite where I play video games, which isn't opposite where I cook anymore. I actually have a proper place. So yeah, I'll be doing a proper studio tour at some point soon, I'm sure. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't heard the song Loam, then I'll have links to it in the description, as well as links to a bunch of other music, including the latest single from PRAERS, Sorry Now. PRAERS is a separate project I'm involved in, for those who don't know, with my good friend Joe Banfi, and there's some very exciting stuff coming soon, including a brand new EP. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I really do hope that you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you soon.